Have you ever noticed something before anyone else did and felt uneasy instead of proud? Not excited, not validated, just heavy. You felt the tension before the argument exploded. You sensed the collapse before anyone admitted it was coming. You knew a relationship was already dead while everyone else was still pretending. And when it finally fell apart, people were shocked. You weren't. You were just left wondering why no one else saw it coming. Here's what Carl Jung warned, and almost no one talks about it. People who see too clearly don't usually fail. They collapse from the inside. Jung believed this ability destroys people unless one specific thing happens. Most never learn what that is. Most people think the danger is being misunderstood. Jung believed the real danger was understanding too much. Because the world doesn't reward people who see clearly. It resists them. In the early 1900s, during his clinical work, Carl Jung noticed something that didn't fit any existing diagnosis. Some patients weren't hallucinating. They weren't delusional. They weren't unstable. They were accurate. Uncomfortably accurate. They could walk into a room and feel what no one was saying. They detected contradictions instantly. They understood people's hidden motives better than the people themselves. Jung realized something disturbing. These people weren't imagining reality. They were perceiving what others were unconsciously avoiding. He called this a highly differentiated perceptual function. In simple terms, they didn't just hear words. They sensed meaning beneath the words. And that made them dangerous. Here's the part that makes people uncomfortable. Society does not function on truth alone. It functions on agreements about what not to notice. Every family has them. Every workplace has them. Every culture has them. Rules like don't talk about that, ignore this tension, pretend everything is fine. When someone sees through these agreements, they don't just disrupt conversations. They destabilize the entire psychological structure. Jung warned that people who see too clearly become threats, not because they attack the system, but because they reveal what the system depends on hiding. And this is where the danger begins. Think of perception like a mirror. Most people avoid mirrors when they don't like what they might see. Now imagine being a walking mirror. You don't accuse. You don't confront. You don't expose. You simply exist. And that's enough. Because reflection is unbearable to people living in denial. This is why people feel uneasy around you without knowing why. Why you're labeled intense, negative, or too deep. Not because you're judging them, but because their unconscious recognizes itself in your presence and panics. Jung called this shadow projection. When someone encounters a truth they're not ready to face, the psyche has two options. It can grow, or it can attack the mirror. Most choose the second. So the person who sees clearly becomes the troublemaker, the pessimist, the difficult one, the scapegoat. Not because you caused the issue, but because you exposed it by existing. Jung saw this pattern again and again. The clearer the perception, the stronger the backlash. At first, this ability feels like awareness. Then it starts to feel like weight. Not ordinary tiredness, but something deeper. Jung called it participation mystique, a state where psychological boundaries dissolve and other people's emotions spill into you. You don't just notice anxiety. You carry it. You don't just observe sadness. You absorb it. Your nervous system processes information no one else even registers. It's like running a high-performance engine without a cooling system. Eventually, something overheats. Jung noticed something terrifying. The people who saw the most often suffered the most. And history shows what happens when perception outpaces integration. One thinker paid the price. This wasn't just a theory for Jung. It happened to him. In 1913, after his break with Sigmund Freud, Jung entered what he later described as a confrontation with the unconscious, and it nearly destroyed him. He was flooded with violent visions, overwhelmed by emotions that didn't seem to belong to him, and pulled into symbolic imagery so intense he feared he was losing his mind. Jung was terrified, not because of what he saw, but because he didn't yet know how to contain it. What Jung realized later would change psychology forever. The danger wasn't insight. The danger was having no structure to hold insight. Jung recognized the pattern immediately. What he was experiencing was the same thing happening to his most perceptive patients. Consciousness was expanding faster than the psyche could stabilize it. And when that happens, one of three things follows: burnout, inflation, collapse. Jung survived because he did something most people don't. He didn't suppress what he saw. He learned how to relate to it. That distinction saved his life. Jung didn't stop with his own experience. He looked backward into history, and what he found disturbed him. The same pattern repeated again and again. Whenever perception outruns integration, collapse follows. And one man became Jung's clearest warning. Friedrich Nietzsche saw through society with terrifying clarity. He exposed moral hypocrisy, religious illusion, and collective self-deception with surgical precision. Few thinkers ever saw as deeply. But Jung believed Nietzsche never learned how to hold what he saw. Instead of relating to his insight, Nietzsche became identified with it. Truth didn't serve him. It consumed him. Isolation followed, then something even more dangerous: inflation. A quiet certainty that he stood above the world he criticized. From there, collapse was inevitable. Not because Nietzsche was weak, but because insight without integration eats the person carrying it. Jung couldn't ignore one question. If depth destroys some people, why doesn't it destroy everyone? That's when he found the contrast. Meister Eckhart reached the same psychological depths Nietzsche did, but he didn't collapse. He didn't weaponize insight. He embodied it. Instead of attacking society, he translated awareness into humility, responsibility, and service. Jung believed Eckhart understood something crucial. Insight must move through the personality, not replace it. Same depth, different posture, different outcome. Think of yourself as an early warning system, like a seismic sensor buried deep underground. You feel tremors long before anyone else notices movement. That doesn't make you anxious. It makes you early. But early doesn't mean safe. Without calibration, early awareness becomes chronic stress. Your nervous system is always braced, always scanning, always preparing for impact. That's not weakness. That's awareness without containment. Here's the part no one warns you about. Once perception sharpens, it doesn't shut off. You can't unknow what you know. You can't return to unconscious comfort. You can only choose between two paths: integrate what you see, or slowly collapse under it. Jung believed this moment made individuation unavoidable, not optional, necessary. For most people who see deeply, the breaking point doesn't look dramatic. It's quiet. You realize you're always tired, always carrying more than others, always adapting while losing yourself. You feel it in your body before you understand it mentally. Something isn't sustainable. Jung believed this moment decides everything, because this is where perception either matures into wisdom or turns inward and begins to destroy the person carrying it. Jung noticed something disturbing in his most perceptive patients. Over time, many of them stopped knowing where they ended and where others began. They became the listener, the emotional regulator, the one who understands, but not the one who is understood. They could describe everyone else with frightening precision, yet struggled to answer a simple question: what do you want? This is the hidden danger of deep perception. You become a psychological container, absorbing, holding, stabilizing, until there's no space left for yourself. Jung called this state participation mystique. A condition where the psyche is so open that unconscious material pours in unchecked. You don't just sense the room. You become the room. Someone's suppressed anger tightens your chest. Another person's grief settles in your stomach. Unspoken tension locks into your jaw. And because this feels normal to you, you assume it's yours. It isn't. You're processing what others can't, and your system never truly shuts down. Jung warned that when consciousness expands faster than containment, the body pays the price. chronic fatigue, anxiety without a clear cause, depression that comes and goes, a constant heaviness. Doctors find nothing wrong, but something is wrong. Your nervous system is overloaded, like a server handling traffic no one else even knows exists. Eventually, withdrawal starts to feel like wisdom. You tell yourself it's safer alone, people aren't ready, disengagement is protection. Jung was explicit here. Withdrawal can protect you temporarily, but if it becomes identity, individuation stops and stagnation begins. And then comes the most dangerous mistake of all. Here is the mistake Jung believed destroys most people who see deeply. Not sensitivity, not depth, not awareness. Identity. The moment perception becomes who you think you are, integration stops. Jung called this inflation. It's subtle and easy to miss. You don't announce it. You don't boast. But somewhere inside, a belief forms. I see what others don't. And slowly, compassion hardens into judgment. Distance turns into detachment. Insight becomes superiority. This is where wisdom collapses. Because no single function, no matter how refined, can carry the weight of an entire personality. Insight was never meant to replace you. It was meant to pass through you. Jung's solution wasn't enlightenment or transcendence. It was wholeness. He called it individuation. Individuation begins with differentiation, learning to separate what is yours from what belongs to others, what is personal from what is collective. This alone changes everything, because not every emotion you feel requires action. Not every tension you sense is your responsibility. Some things don't need fixing. They need boundaries. Jung made a difficult observation. People who are most disturbed by others' shadows often haven't integrated their own. This doesn't mean you're wrong. It means your psyche is asking for honesty. Every quality you perceive in others, fear, manipulation, avoidance, weakness, exists as potential within you too. Integration doesn't mean indulging it. It means owning your humanity. When you stop denying your shadow, it stops hijacking your perception. Awareness becomes cleaner, calmer, less reactive. This is where everything changes. Jung called the final stage conscious participation. You no longer merge unconsciously with collective emotion. You choose when and how to engage. You can enter intense environments without absorbing them. You can see dysfunction without becoming it. You can speak truth without needing approval. This is where perception stops hurting and starts helping. Think again of the early warning system. A seismic sensor isn't meant to panic. It's meant to register movement accurately. When calibrated, it saves lives. When overwhelmed, it breaks. Individuation is calibration. Not dulling awareness, but learning how to hold it. Jung noticed that individuating individuals rarely live predictable lives. There are detours, interruptions, collapses, abrupt endings. This isn't failure. It's the psyche refusing to live falsely. Every breakdown was a correction. Every ending was realignment. You weren't lost. You were being redirected inward. At some point, something deeper becomes visible. The wound, often early, often invisible, often misunderstood. Being too sensitive, too aware, too honest. That wound didn't weaken you. It opened you. Jung believed the wound becomes the organ of perception. And once integrated, the source of strength. Healing doesn't erase the wound. It gives it meaning. There is a moment that arrives quietly for people who see deeply. No announcement. No drama. Just an internal shift. You realize you can't live the way you've been living anymore. Not because life is unbearable, but because it's no longer true. Jung believed this was the real beginning of individuation, not awakening. Responsibility. Once you see clearly, ignorance is no longer an option. You notice how systems quietly damage people, how relationships survive on avoidance, how success often demands self-betrayal. You want belonging, but not at the cost of integrity. You want connection, but not built on illusion. Jung understood this conflict well. He wrote that consciousness always comes with loss. Loss of innocence, loss of simplicity, loss of easy belonging. But it also comes with meaning, and meaning makes the burden survivable. Jung believed individuated people serve a specific role, not dominance, not superiority, not withdrawal, mediation. You bring awareness into unconscious spaces. You sense imbalance early. You articulate what others feel but can't name. Sometimes this looks like counseling, sometimes art, sometimes leadership, sometimes simply refusing to lie. There is no single expression, only authenticity. When integration takes hold, something changes. You stop explaining yourself. You stop shrinking. You stop chasing spaces that can't hold you. And slowly, without forcing it, life reorganizes. The wrong people fall away. The right ones recognize you. Solitude becomes nourishing, not lonely. Work becomes meaningful, not perfect. You're no longer split. You're whole. Jung left a final warning. Consciousness cannot be undone. Ignored, it turns inward and destroys. Integrated, it turns outward and heals. The danger isn't death. The danger is refusing to live it. You don't suffer because you see too much. You suffer when you live as if you don't. You were never broken. You were never too intense. You were never meant to blend in. You were born with eyes that see beneath the surface because humanity needs people who can sense what's coming next. But only if those people survive their own awareness. Only if they integrate instead of isolate. Only if they choose embodiment over exile. Carl Jung believed the most important work happens quietly, inside individuals who refuse to abandon themselves, who stay conscious in an unconscious world, who carry awareness without arrogance and depth without despair. If you're listening to this, you're not here by accident. You don't need to become someone else. You only need to stop abandoning who you already are. Your perception is not your curse. It's your calling, but only when you live it consciously. This channel is for people who don't fit mass psychology. If you felt that your whole life, you already know why you're here. Subscribe. More Jungian psychology, depth work, and content for people who see beyond the surface is coming. And if you stay to the end, leave a comment with one word: integrated. Because once you understand this, there's no going back. And you were never meant to.